Now we flip things over to the Green Party headquarters over on Vancouver Island. That's where we find Tanya Fletcher. And Tanya, the Green Party also talking a lot about what would mean success for them tonight and what would mean failure.
That's right. In a nutshell, Andrew's success would be doubling their seat count or more. Of course, leader Andrew Weaver is currently the only Green MLA in the legislature, so they're hoping for at least 2 seats, possibly 3. That would definitely, I think, be a victory for the Greens. We were chatting with some of the campaign directors earlier. That's what they're hoping for. 4 seats would give them official party status. So that's what they have to gain, and what they have to lose is a lot as well. So this election not only significant, of course, for the Green Party, but for the election as a whole. We talk about the Greens holding the balance of power, where there's been talk about vote splitting on the left. And Andrew Weaver says, you know what, I'm always about policy and not politics. So he has said if he is the one and only candidate still remaining who wins his seat for the Greens, he'll consider that a failure. And he says he'll serve his 4 years, serve his term as MLA for Oak Bay Gordon Head, but after that he won't run again. He'll step aside and they'll have to find a new leader. And at that point, it's really a question of where does the party go? Do they blow it up completely and start from scratch? Or do they try to still build on the momentum they've gained through this campaign? You saw that about halfway through when the televised leaders debate, when everyone kind of sat up and took notice of Andrew Weaver. Of course, anyone who is essentially concerned about the environment above all would obviously vote for the Greens in theory. And they've also taken a very hard line on a couple of other issues. The Greens have taken the most hardline and aggressive approach when it comes to affordable housing. In their platform, they're promising to double the foreign home buyers tax to 30% and make it province-wide. They're also saying they'd bring in a speculation tax, and as well they would tax sellers who flip their homes within 5 years. So affordable housing, arguably the biggest issue of this election for all of British Columbians, especially here, not only in Metro Vancouver, but on Vancouver Island, which across the board has traditionally been an NDP stronghold. That's where the Greens hope to make the most gains. And you heard John Horgan talk about $10 a day daycare for the NDP. Well, Andrew Weaver is saying, hey, we'll have free daycare for working parents who have kids under the age of 3. So some pretty bold statements in their platform. Of course, they're the only party when it comes to cash for access that's already banned union and corporate donations. And I was speaking with a political scientist yesterday who said, in a pleasant twist of irony perhaps for the Greens, they've actually had almost $1 million come into their kitty for this campaign, you know, presumably based on that stance. So a lot of positives working for the Greens, and of course a lot of those riding and resting on the shoulders of their leader, Andrew Weaver. So tonight we'll see if they can at least maintain, and if not pick up some seats as well, and whether that comes at the detriment of the NDP will be a big question as well, Andrew.
Yeah, and those ridings, I mean, particularly on Vancouver Island, those are the swing ridings that we have to keep a very close eye on in terms of in which direction they might swing. I want to flip things over to Green Party headquarters right now. That's where we've got Tanya Fletcher standing by right now. And the Greens, boy, do they ever have a lot on their plate, huh?
You bet, Andrew, and historic night here for the Green Party, and I have Deputy Party Leader Matt Toner joining me here now at Party headquarters in Victoria. So you said it yourself a moment ago, you're making history. Talk about the balance of power situation for the Greens.
Yeah, this is really something extraordinary, not just for the Green Party, but I really think for the people of British Columbia. We've ran our campaign talking about a principled, consistent approach to decision-making, using evidence, not vitriol and politics, to make up our minds on points, and the province is responding, as you can see. So I think it could be a very interesting situation for everybody in BC starting tomorrow.
So has your party, I assume you prepared for all scenarios, including a balance of power type scenario. So what have you talked about as far as options going forward here? Well,
I think what we really have been very firm on is if we're to work with either of the other two parties, we have to get money out of politics and we have to consider electoral reform. Those are really the two deal-breaking issues for us. So that's our jumping-off point. Now, we're happy to have conversations with both of our friends in either party, but they have to really come to us in that spirit of cooperation and making a better BC today in this province. And that's where we start, electoral reform and campaign finance reform.
Now, I know Andrew Weaver was quoted as saying it's policy over politics, and yet a number of political scientists I've spoken with in the past few days have said, you know, parties can say all they want policy-wise and in theory and ideology, but when it comes down to personalities, it's kind of no big secret that there's no love lost between Andrew Weaver and John Horgan. What do you make of that?
You know, I'll tell you, I ran for the BC NDP in 2013, left that party afterwards because I wanted a better kind of change more quickly, and I found it with the BC Greens. And so have a lot of other people. Andrew he leads with his heart, he wears his emotions on his sleeves, but he's a practical guy, he's a sensitive guy, and I think he's going to make a tremendous, you know, politician as he continues to follow this path. I think a lot's been made out of this John Horgan, Andrew Weaver thing. I'm sure that, you know, one of the first things Andrew will do is to reach out to people on both sides, both parties, and say, it's a new day in British Columbia, what do we do together?
And on the Christy Clark side with the Liberals, I mean, that might be more of a leap regarding policy. And can you come to a middle ground and reach some compromises? Will you have to concede a little bit on policy? That's
going to be tricky, because obviously we're a little more antithetical to a lot of their big economic platforms like the LNG industry. So at this stage we don't want to comment on anything. There's going to be a lot of decisions made in the next days and weeks, and we're going to approach every single one of those decisions with not just principles and consistency and looking at evidence, but optimism. Because I think this is a hell of an interesting day for the province of British Columbia. It's historic, and I think that people are going to be really delighted when they see what this kind of government can do, working with BC Greens to make a better British Columbia. I couldn't be happier.
And finally, on the note regarding Andrew Weaver as party leader, he's been described as the most non-politician of all the politicians. So what does this mean for him? This is a big burden and or a responsibility, I guess. Is he ready to take this on?
No question, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we think in provincial politics sometimes as being this big, grand stage, but Andrew's played on a much bigger stage as a climate scientist. He's got the capacity for this, I have no doubt. And in fact, if you look at all of our candidates, go right down the list. We have some exceptional people that have been drawn to our party, and we approach things in a different way. Like Andrew and I, we will disagree from time to time, and unlike some politicians, he will listen, he will weigh up the evidence, and make up his own mind. I mean, in other political parties, I would have been banished to Siberia a long time ago, but Andrew listens, and he respects your opinion, and if he brings that attitude into government this session, we're going to see a much better province. I'm convinced of that.
A good night for you.
It's a great night for British Columbia, but a really good night for the BC Greens, that's for sure.
Thank you so much. That's Deputy Party Leader for the Greens, Matt Toner, joining me. Andrew, back to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Tanya. We've got Tanya Fletcher standing by right now with a whole other part of this story. She's at Green Party headquarters right now. And Tanya, I understand, with Andrew Weaver's parents.
That's right, Andrew. So just a moment ago, Andrew Weaver let CBC up into their private hotel suite where he himself has gathered with his family watching the results come in, and they graciously agreed to talk with us. So this is Ludmilla and John Weaver, Andrew Weaver's parents. So first of all, I understand I was up in the hotel suite there. It looked like the attitude and the atmosphere was quite positive, but a little bit nervous. Tell me, a mother knows best, how is Andrew feeling right now?
Well, I think he is a little bit nervous, and he's trying not to be. So he goes outside and refreshes himself and comes back to the room, rejuvenated.
And tell us who else is in there. There's a bit of a delay, so they're just now watching the CBC on the big screen behind us do this interview with Andrew's parents. So tell us who else is up in the hotel suite right now.
Well, his wife, Helen, her parents are there. Her daughter and son are there. So Andrew's in-laws and the grandchildren there. And who else is there? Alexandra's friends.
His sister and daughters and son.
And our grandchildren are running around there. So it's full of kids.
That's great. And John, yourself, I know you were helping out with Andrew's campaign. Tell me a little bit about that from your standpoint.
I just came in near the end of it, phoning people and sitting in the office with a very enthusiastic young set of campaigners. I think I was the oldest there by far. But it was fun phoning people and asking if they'd been to the poll yet. And I actually drove an elderly couple to the polling station as well, which was very nice to meet them.
So definitely a busy month for you both. And finally, what are you hoping for tonight for your son?
Oh, he's worked so hard. and I think I'd like him to be re-elected, and because he's an honest, hard-working person, and in politics, it's not always like that.
And final words from you?
Well, I hope he gets some colleagues in the legislature. It's been a hard battle, a lone voice, and he's introduced a lot of bills, and I think he needs some backup help. I'm just hoping he gets 2 or 3 others to sit in the legislature with him.
There you have it. That's Andrew Weaver's father and mother themselves telling us what the Green Party is hoping for by the end of election night. It's really starting to get crowded and louder in here, so we'll have to see as the results come in. Quite hopeful at this point, though, Andrew.
Yeah, all right, thanks so much, Tanya. And yeah, that is an absolutely critical point.
What do you expect to concede on in any other policy?
Well, you know, everything is give and take. BC Greens have said we would work with anyone. We'll continue to have discussions, and we know how to compromise. We're looking forward to that.
Andrew Weaver was flanked by his 2 new MLAs as they together walked into the Rose Gardens here at the BC Legislature. And on their way in, they threw up their hands and together declared, "We are the first Green caucus in North America." Now, Andrew Weaver went on to say that he's been in touch with the other 2 party leaders to set up meetings now to discuss priorities moving forward. And when asked what his big issues are, he says there's one order of business that, in his mind, stands out.
The most important issue for us right now, and #1 deal breaker, is banning big money in BC politics. We are described as the Wild West here. It is a non-negotiable issue for us to support either of the parties.
Weaver's mantra throughout the campaign has been policy over politics. And when asked about potentially working with an NDP government, Weaver said he's open to that and he will cross party lines to come to compromises on a number of issues. He says actually the Greens and the NDP have at least one thing in common when it comes to the Liberals, and that's they both believe Christy Clark's government has failed on a number of fronts.
We both believe that the disparity between those who have and those who haven't clearly has got out of control. We both agreed on this, that education is our top priority, as I said on the steps of the legislature 2.5 years ago, and as we reaffirmed in our platform, has been let go, let aside. We both agreed that big money needs to be banned from politics. We both agreed on a number of issues, yes.
As for Weaver's other key priorities, he says electoral reform and talking specifically about proportional representation will be key moving forward. Not really much of a surprise considering his party has doubled now its popular vote and tripled its seat count in this election. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Victoria.